Maybe I'll turn my camera off if most people have theirs off. Is that better or?
Yeah, that's fine. It's up to you. Good morning, everybody. Everyone's starting to trickle in here. And welcome to KM in the AM. Some of you are new to us. Some of you are old hat at this, and you may even recognize our speaker today, Michael Johnny. He's from York University. But before we get to all of that, I'd like to acknowledge that here, I'm myself and I think Jen, who I was talking to earlier, are gathered on Treaty 6 territory, which is the homeland of the Métis. I'd like you all to take a moment to reflect on your own land acknowledgement and what that means to you. It's a very personal thing. And so let's take a moment to honor the First Nations and Métis ancestors of this land and reaffirm connections to them and each other and to the land. They have been the stewards of the land since the beginning of time in this part of the world. So you can use the chat, recognize tell us where you're calling from, and also what you do, how you do it, and why you do it. So this session is being recorded, and I'd like to note that if you choose not to be part of the recording, there's a couple things you can do. You can turn your video off, change your screen name to something innocuous, and that means you can still participate in the chat and things, but you won't be recognizable in the recording. Now I'm thrilled to introduce someone who's been instrumental in advancing knowledge mobilization. I've known Michael Johnny for a long, long time. And he's been the manager of knowledge mobilization at York University since 2006. And that's probably about when I came across Michael Johnny through David Phipps. So Michael, you've been a driving force in connecting researchers, students, and community leaders to maximize the social, economic, and environmental aspect of research. You started with KM in the AM at York University. Yep. We wrote your name and the concept, and we've been keeping it going here in Saskatchewan for 10 years now. This is our 10th year, and throughout this year, we are trying to bring you something new and interesting each and every month. So with that, I'd like you to join me in giving warm welcome to Michael Johnny. Yay! And with that, Michael, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Fabulous. Well, thank you very much, Bonnie. First thing I want to do is thank you for the warm welcome and the opportunity. The one thing I really appreciate about this community in which we're all part of is that there is a really high degree of sharing. There's very little that's proprietary, and to be able to connect and engage with all of you and share a little bit of work that we've done, I mean, similar to KM and the AM, but a lot of our work has been kind of developed on the shoulders of others who have, really developed services within their communities and institutions to help make this work make sense. As Bonnie mentioned, I work at York University and have for quite a while. I just love the work, so it's as exciting as it was when I started back in the day. What I'm more excited about is I've got a little more comfort and confidence about what I do. When I started, and I wish this was a joke, I spent the first 3 weeks, probably closer to a month or two, just at my desk reading because I was afraid someone was going to ask me what I did. And it's kind of grown from there. My colleague, Krista Jensen, is unable to join today. She sends her regrets. She's been pulled into a national project team, which MobilizeU is going to be a big component of. So I'll get right into it. I'm going to get into the screen sharing. If there's any problems seeing this, please let me know. I told Bonnie that my experience in, can everybody see that? Are we good? I think I'm messing it up. Okay, so let me just get to something else. Here we go. That should be a bit better. Is that working?
Perfect.
All right, fabulous.
You
Thank you
can
very
make it, you can make it full screen if you like, because we can see your,
There we go.
there we
So
go. Perfect.
awesome. All right, so you morning people, I love it, and I am aligned. I acknowledge that probably this isn't everyone's jam. Everybody's biorhythm is a little bit different. For my colleague, Krista, she would be a bigger fan of KM and the PM, if I'm being honest. She would trade in the breakfast conversation over coffee for a late night conversation over a glass of wine. So for those that are fighting against the current, I appreciate you getting up early and joining us. And for others that are in your absolute sweet spot, I'm with you. I mean, my ideal workday is about 6 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon. And anybody that sets a meeting after 4 in the afternoon, I kind of feel they've got something, like they just don't like me or something. But we are all different. But still, it's a privilege to be here with you this morning. So a few assumptions. I mean, we may not take the 90 minutes, but I'll walk through, and I invite you to just jump in with questions. I've got this on full screen myself, so I can't see you. So I would ask Bonnie and feel free to ask questions anytime. I invite you to just simply jump in. But if somebody's typing anything in the chat, Bonnie, just let me know. I'm going to ask that we go with these assumptions, and if there are any questions about them, we can discuss them at the end, because it kind of grounds a bit of the talk around MobilizeU and the whole training and capacity building piece. Well, my definition for knowledge mobilization, this is taken from Peter Levesque, who is probably one of the leading consultants in this space, since retired, but his impact is long-standing. Knowledge mobilization takes the best of what we know and makes it useful for people in our communities. There's no reference to universities there, although universities tend to be a place where a lot of this work is championed, in addition to larger organizations like hospitals, health centers, but it is growing in many disciplines. I think the important thing, and I kind of reflected on this before today, is where are the professional roles and where are they kind of situated? Not physically where, but what are their areas of focus? Because training, to be relevant, would probably need to help support development in all of these areas. One of the challenges with knowledge mobilization, in my estimation, it is not an intuitive term. And if we look at how diverse knowledge mobilization roles are across Canada, we further muddy the water. There are some folks who focus in public engagement. Memorial University has a long-standing record of leadership here. It's kind of woven into the mandate of their university. Say within the last 5 to 10 years, training and capacity building has become really important in knowledge mobilization, given the number of professionals there are. Let's look at universities, for example. It's hard for us service professionals to do the work. It's a lot easier to provide training and support so that a collaborative research team can do the work themselves. I think it also acknowledges the fact that there are engaged scholars and community leaders who are skilled and adept at this in the first place. It's not like when the first knowledge mobilization unit started up that we had invented something. It's a process that's been fairly organic. There are also a number of folks who reside in spaces of communications, generally small C communications, where they're involved in a knowledge translation role, where they're helping their researchers and partners develop alternative knowledge products to be able to disseminate and engage. There's also partnership development, folks who are working at the front end of knowledge production or the research cycle to connect researchers with community, government, and industry. There is a small but mighty group of folks whose efforts around knowledge mobilization focus around grant support, and that's popular within universities, where all researchers now need to articulate a knowledge mobilization plan. These researchers will help support the application, a critical examination of that section, and a lot of it is around procuring in-kind support. I think something that's the last one I think that's gonna mushroom over the next 5 to 10 years is a focus on research impact and assessment. I think there are going to be a growing number of professionals who will work with collaborative teams to help them tell a more comprehensive story around the so what of what they've done. So those are the rather broad buckets. I'll be curious to know if you feel like there's some that are missing, and look forward to discussing that. So this is what I'm going to do over the next little while. I'm going to provide an overview of the knowledge mobilization training landscape. I'll introduce MobilizeU along with its various iterations, which we're aware of at York University. Share some reflections, and I'll present an opportunity, which I think is relevant to this group in Saskatchewan, and allow time for questions and discussions. But that being said, don't be afraid to let me know if there's something you want any clarification on while we go. Does that sound good? All right, here we go. I'm always fascinated by where people position themselves in this space, especially now that knowledge mobilization has been around for quite a while. I know this has been a very active and dynamic group. So I'll present these first 2 points, and then I'm going to kind of minimize the screen share to see what you respond. And I'd like you to respond in the chat on these first 2 questions around where you think you are. Are you a Padawan? Are you just like, hey, I'm new to this, so talk slow, go easy on me. I don't know what I don't know. Would you call yourself a Jedi Knight, where it's like, yeah, I've been around for a while. I think I know a few things. Maybe, I've just started working in this space. Or are you a Jedi Master? Do you have professional responsibilities that are directly linked to this? And do you feel in the back of your head, it's like, hey, if this guy wasn't able to make it in today, I could have presented on something. I think I've got things I can share with this group. So you would fall into one of those 3 camps. Specific to training, the second question is, to what extent have you engaged in knowledge mobilization training? The first one is like none or very little. It's like it's like another one of those speak slowly because I'm fairly new. The second one is kind of like whatever I can get my hands on. I engage in it. I know I've got a ways to go, but I'm kind of on a journey. And the third one, I think similar to the first point, is yeah, I've done some training. I'm confident, I'm fluent, I work in this space. So with that, I'm going to exit out, and I'm going to see how the responses are. Jump into the chat. Look at that. You guys are super active here. I love it. All right, we got some diverse. So it's varied, and I think that's really good. It's a pretty rich and diversified network in. Actually, I appreciate Kelly's answer. All levels, depending on the project and the group. I think part of that could be if you work within a specific thematic space. Let's say you work in adult education, which is my early career. Then it's like, all right, that's kind of where I live. That's where I reside. All right, well, thanks for being so honest. I appreciate that. Get back to our regularly scheduled sharing. Yeah, Tashita, folks' journeys into this is always fascinating. That would be a fun story to engage in. Can folks see? Can someone give me a little verbal that we're back?
We're back, so we can see your slides again.
Okay, awesome. Thanks. From the current slide. Okay, so the training landscape. I know there's others, and I invite you to put these in the chat for each other's benefit. The University of Guelph had, and I think it's still active, they have a certificate program, so it is accredited. You would get a University of Guelph accredited certificate in knowledge mobilization. I think it involves 3 credits. It has a fairly intensive applied component to it. It's probably the most robust. The Hospital for Sick Kids probably has the longest standing training. This would be led by Dr. Melanie Barwick and her team. The Scientific Knowledge Translation Training, in the early days, Krista and I took it, and it was fascinating because we were actually in there with health scientists. It was a 5-day session, full day, and they had a lot of homework to do at night. So they came together and over the course of those 5 days created for themselves a very comprehensive knowledge translation plan based on the training. Each one of the 13 steps that Melanie had created was broken down into a curricular framework that introduced the concepts, the terminology, and started to explore the applied components. And they would kind of go off in their little groups and do a bit of work. Because when I first heard about it, it's like 5 days. What are you going to do in 5 days? Well, a lot of them needed more time. It shows how robust this can be. Her leadership in this space, I think, has actually informed a lot of other planning tools and resources. I'll share it with Bonnie afterward to share with all of you. One of my favorite knowledge mobilization planning resources was developed from a group out in Eastern Ontario. It was a youth mental health group that really took Dr. Barwick's 13 steps and translated it into a different modality that kind of went through a what, where, why, when, how, and it's, I think, a little easier for folks to kind of wrap their head around. It was all in a fillable PDF. So it allowed project teams to come together and workshop it, like kind of co-create it over the course of a day or a half day, or you and one of your partners could buzz through and like just do a 15-20 minute triage and kind of do a high level. So that's my go-to. And the third training piece is MobilizeU. And that's, of course, where I'm going to get into today. This is the last time that I'm going to stop the screen share. I'll be curious to know, and for here, if it's possible, I invite folks to type in the chat or even feel free to verbalize what would make this session successful for you today, and what is one thing that you would like to learn?
Hey, Michael?
Yes.
So at the top of your screen, there is you are sharing your entire screen thing.
Yep.
And there's a little minus sign beside that.
Right.
Click that down because that bar was covering up your headline.
Okay.
There
All
you
right.
go.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Perfect.
And, like Michael said, welcome you to unmute. Raise your hand. If you're
Absolutely.
unfamiliar with Google Meet, the raise your hand button is right at the bottom of your screen. So feel free to use either version. And we don't have questions yet, but we do have one young person who just started in the field as a KMB intern.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, Deshita Guy. I probably mangled that name. So if you'd like to give me the pronunciation of your name, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, especially Deshita, if you're in there and you have these moments where it's like, wow, now like it's awesome that I got this placement. Like, what do I actually do? That I cannot hear you. But if you want to type something in, that would be okay. But it's interesting space, and I think what's happening now is, Deshita, there's access to a lot more resources than there used to be. Like it is a much growing profession. It is highly recognized, not only as a profession but as a modality of engaged scholarship. For example, in academia, I mean, there is a growing culture around this work. I think in certain disciplines too, education, health, social work. There are a number of them where you could talk to folks and say, "Hey, this is what I'm doing," and they would actually like, "Well, okay, I get it. That's cool." Versus back in the day where it's like, "What are you doing?" All right. Well, I'm going to jump right back into it. So no worries at all. It's let me get back to business here. All right. Okay, so here we go. So MobilizeU, the story of MobilizeU began before 2019. This probably would have been 2017 or 2018. My colleague and I were sitting in our office. The training and capacity aspect of our work started based on need. And we created a series of workshops that we would deliver across campus. Some of them was around developing a knowledge mobilization plan. Others were specific to clear language communications or developing a social media strategy. And there were others, like we had just developed a host of content, and we were sitting around our workspace, and Krista's idea is like, we should wrap all of these up into like a course. And I'm like, wow, that sounds pretty cool. So we spent the better part of 6 to 8 months kind of bringing that together and starting to explore what would the thematic areas be, some of which were fairly highly developed for us. Others needed a lot more work. And we rolled it out initially in 2019 in the winter term. And it's funny because we got, when we did it in 2020, we got about 2/3 of the way through, and we had to very quickly pivot to online. Where we are today, the course structure is similar, but it's available each year at York University and Simon Fraser University. It's also been expanded to Research Impact Canada. That's a national knowledge mobilization network to which University of Regina and the University of Saskatchewan are members. Research Impact Canada operates as a community of practice, which brings together staff, researchers, and in some cases, partners to better understand this work we're doing. It is a place to share, it is a place to learn. So I won't go down the Research Impact Canada rabbit hole, but safe to say that there are summer opportunities within our member institutions to participate in this course. One of the more seminal developments in the overall development of this course happened over the time of the pandemic. We had a scholarly association, a student group in gerontology, reach out to us, and they asked us if we would be open to delivering a custom course to them. And we said, well, what does a custom course mean to you? And they said, well, you've got your thematic pillars, and we would like to adopt that, but we would like to bring in subject matter experts to present around that thematic area, but with a content backfill. And I'm like, well, that's just ridiculously awesome. In those early days, it was a series of lectures that Krista and I would, like, we kind of, and maybe we bring one person in, but it was very much we're going to share what we think we know. And that was seminal for us because it was a real shift in pedagogy that we haven't really deviated from, and it's something that exists within Research Impact Canada. I think from a pedagogical standpoint, it's great for participants not to hear the same teacher like over and over and over again. It brings together voices and perspectives, and to me, it really enriches the course opportunity. Back in 2022, we also collaborated with one of our local community partners, the United Way Greater Toronto, and co-created a modest version of the course for them, which did not have 8 modules, but it was less than that, and I'll get into that a bit. So there have been some structural changes over the years, and I think they've only strengthened what we're offering. So at a high level, we've always offered it as 8 weeks. It's always self-directed. For participants, we ask it's about generally 1 to 2 hours of time in person with some pre-reading beforehand. Good thing about self-directed is folks can kind of they can bring in their own experience, and it's very much respectful of their life. So invariably what I find is over the course of the 8 weeks, folks have 1 or 2 weeks where they want to do the deepest of deep dives. Like they're really interested in partnership development, or they're really interested in evaluation and impact. And we can't give them enough information. They're like, I'll read everything you've got. Whereas other times it's like, all right, I'm interested and I'll skim through it, but that's not as important. Gives them a lot of control over it as well. And the fact that it's a non-credit course allows them to really drive their own engagement. For folks that are interested and knowledgeable about learning styles, the asynchronous and synchronous approaches give folks a wide array of engagement options and opportunities. We focus on beginner mobilizers. What we want to do is create a clear and common understanding across our campus and building a culture of knowledge mobilization. So we invite faculty, postdocs, staff, graduate students, alumni, and community partners. It's a fairly broad swath of engagement. When we look across the Research Impact Canada network, it's free. I'll get into the engagement this summer. I'll get into that a little bit later, but safe to say if you're affiliated with one of the member institutions, there's a chance to participate for free. And for non-Research Impact Canada participants, we've got a pay-to-play thing, which I think in relation to Guelph and the SKTT model, it's a much easier price point to engage. Some of the non-academic organizations that have participated have actually found there to be high value in this. So the topics, and again, these over the course of this, let's say 6 years, they haven't really changed that much. We introduce knowledge mobilization. It requires an introduction. We get into the history. We get into the terminology, and try to give everybody a clear and common understanding. What we're really trying to do is establish a foundation. The second week, we get into theories, models, and frameworks, and there's a growing number of them out there. And I think that affords opportunity for folks based on their professional and scholarly interests to kind of position themselves within this broader space. Knowledge mobilization planning, which isn't just an academic good idea. Given how purposeful this work is, I think there's a lot of value in the planning. We walk through what we find to be the critical steps in planning. But in addition to that, we share basically a compendium of resources which are out there. There is a growing number of planning tools. The partnership building piece, it's funny if you've been around this space for a while and so much gets bandied about where it's like, oh, it's all about building trust. Well, that's true. The partnership building is really critical in that, not only for all of us as mobilizers, but in the work we do and for the people we support. Let's say, for example, there's a researcher who's relatively new to Saskatoon, and it's like, okay, well, my whole scholarship's been out in BC. Partnership building and creating a credible name for themselves is going to be important. Maybe not around the processes of partnership building, but just finding out who the players are within that new community for them. For young and emerging scholars, it could be learning collaborative partnership building practices. So we go through all of that. Inclusive knowledge mobilization. I think for a lot of our institutions where the commitment to DE&I still remains pretty high, we talk about inclusive knowledge mobilization. This really shines a light on good practices to draw in some of the reflective lessons. Engaging audiences effectively, which again, we start to see some interconnection. We start to see how this scaffolds up from planning and partnership building to, we get into aspects of governance, this really starts to introduce notions of communication. The seventh week around communications is a little bit twofold. It's a little bit of it is, pardon me, a bit of it is about strategy, but a lot of it too is about knowledge products. And we've certainly come a long way from my early days where communications was, I'm going to build a website and I'm going to create a one-page lay summary and maybe present at a conference. And none of those are wrong. Like, it's not a wrong approach, but there is so much more. And the filter, in my estimation, is how do your audiences like to access information? So it's a lot of it is a bit of a broadening of folks' mindsets to start to explore what's out there. And there's a lot of creative approaches to this. The final one around research and research impact and evaluation, that's proven to be really successful in our experience. There are a lot of folks that are really interested in this, and I'm glad, because like I mentioned at the offset, I think we're about 5 or 10 years away from this being fundamental around what we do. So if anybody is working in knowledge mobilization, you may as well just say, I'm working in knowledge mobilization and research impact, because I think the two of them will be lock and step in time. I'm actually thinking I want to pitch it to my boss and boss's boss about renaming our office a knowledge mobilization and research impact office. Firstly, it makes it a little bit more intuitive, but I also want to drive some of our services into that space.
Hey, Michael.
Yes.
Regarding that, do you think, when you said, 10 years in the future, do you think eventually they'll be under one sort of topic, like just knowledge mobilization? Or is there some, is there much more benefit to separating the two, knowledge mobilization and research impact?
A fabulous question, Bonnie. I think context is going to be key to that. Where I am at York, I want to create services that will provide value and differentiate. There is a growing number of staff across campus who are involved in knowledge mobilization. So part of this is strategic. I want to be able to position our office as still providing value for our campus. I also think that research impact is more of an opportunity for our researchers and their partners to better tell their stories. I'll try to be concise here. I think we are really beholden to the culture of project funding, where you work on a 1, 2, 5 year project, you're done, you fill out your final report, and you're on to the next project. But there's not, our collective engagement in evaluation, it's more of a bar we're going to trip over than we're going to hit our head on. So I think there's opportunities to explore methodologies from a service capacity to help our researchers and their partners better tell a story. So
right. Part of that is the evaluation part, right? And that's something we hear from our members a lot, is how do we evaluate in an efficient and effective way, and then what do we do with that information after?
Exactly. Yeah. So there are opportunities there, and while it is a salient question and one that's really kind of percolating up for folks that are engaged in that space, I think that is going to be the next level of deep engagement across this profession in terms of exploring methodologies that are simply feasible within the capacity structures of our institutions. I don't think anybody's at the point where the tail needs to wag the dog. We'll never get to the point because education is simply provincially administered. We won't get to the UK where there'll be this national research excellence framework. I don't think we'll ever have something that's national. But we can come together and explore the best of some of those methodologies around a way to help collect and communicate evidence, even from a service capacity where it's more just value add. So there are opportunities. This is the one thing I tell our project teams at York. If you think your project has the chance to have an impact, if you think there's an opportunity for a second phase, for example, if there's an opportunity to scale up your work in the future, invest in evaluation.
Mm.
Bring in external evaluators that can help structure a methodology to help collect and communicate the evidence of what you've done. It's an easy thing not to do, right? Because the culture of busyness. It's just so you can kind of reflect and have conversations. Were you happy? Were you happy? Did that work for you? But I think all we're talking about then are outcomes and outputs. So we're just kind of missing the mark. But that's
Lots of work to do around evaluation yet.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, and that's where we are collectively. So I hope no one's stressed out about this, because this is just a topic that is emerging, and it will emerge so in time. So there is opportunities.
Okay, well, back to your presentation.
Thanks. So when we started out at York, it was 8 weeks. We started in that winter of 2019, and we used to do this 3 times a year. We did it the winter term, the fall term, and the summer. Now we just do it in the winter term, and we collapse our summer engagement across the national network. It was always free for York faculty, postdocs, staff, grad students, alumni, and community partners, with a modest fee for others. And we kind of made up the fee structure, but it's been refined and nuanced over time. We offer a certificate. It is not a recognized certificate. It has no accreditation value, but I think for folks, they really appreciate that, and some will still put it on a CV that I've received a certificate for taking this course. As mentioned before, we did a rather hard switch to virtual in 2020. We haven't looked back from that. It has allowed for more equitable engagement for folks that may be a little further away from our campus. And for in terms of numbers, over 600 folks have taken this program just at York. Now, if we look nationally, and it was really quickly, it might have even been the second session that we did in 2020, where we started to think about engagement across our national network. So we did a pilot with the University of Winnipeg and Memorial University. The 3 of us came together to really administer what was pretty much the exact same curricular framework that we had done at York. We all got involved in delivering some of the curriculum. Our colleagues from Winnipeg and St. John's, they had certain areas of experience and expertise, so they would jump in and present. That was where we first really started thinking about bringing in some non-knowledge broker expertise as well. We started thinking about that a lot more seriously. Since that time, it's been something that's been offered every summer across Research Impact Canada. So much so that from a governance standpoint, a MobilizeU committee has been struck, and it has, let's say, either side of 10 members. They come together to co-create the curricular framework for the next year. They'll comb through the evaluations to determine the areas of efficacy and points of improvement. For this year, there is free space for 10 people from each institution. And if you look at that and it's like 10, why not 50? Well, we have 41 members. So, and given the curricular framework, it is participatory, but there's also an optional assignment which folks can do. And if we were getting 2,000 assignments coming in, that's a lot to ask for a volunteer committee. So, yeah, that being said, folks outside of the network can still attend for a fee. There's also group discounts for larger groups. There's growing flexibility. The working group is starting to explore models for alternative engagement. Similarly to what we've done at York, there is a certificate model available, and over the first 4 years, over 2,500 participants. So I'm going to pivot now and talk about a more localized delivery that we did. And this was with the United Way, Greater Toronto. they had broadcast this to all of their member agencies. The United Way, Greater Toronto, is probably one of the largest, it's not probably, it's the largest United Way in Canada. And it's the amalgamation of Toronto, Peel region, and York region. So you have a catchment area of over 6.5 million people, and all the human service organizations affiliated with those three have collapsed into one with their, trying to think of the team name. I think it's their member agency engagement team. We distilled the course into 5 topic areas that we offered over a rather extended time. MobilizeU, when we do it at York and across Research Impact Canada, it is 8 consecutive weeks. Well, we did 1 session a month for 5 months. We collapsed the introduction and the planning piece. The second one was around data equity and inclusive knowledge mobilization practices. Effective partners. I mean, you could read the list here. I think what really brought this to light was we worked with their team to identify either leading academics from York that could speak to this really well, or community leaders who had a lot of experience and things to say. And it was, I think, a 3-to-2 split where we had 2 York folks and 3 community folks. And they would present. The participants had pre-reading, so there was things that they could read before, and there was also videos that they could watch. And these are probably ones that Krista and I did, where it's like a 15-20 minute, here's what you need to know. Because these other ones were very contextualized around either their scholarship or their practice, but it really kind of brought it alive. It was a mini lecture followed by, so I already talked about that. Then afterward, we gave the folks an opportunity to engage in group discussions, so really contextualize it. They would share questions amongst themselves. We put them into working groups. And the numbers for us, we were quite impressed with the participant. There were close to 400 unique participants from over 120 organizations. And the evaluation success, I think it was about 95% found value in it. So knowing that in the human services sphere that there's interest for this was more assuring for me. My assumption was that there would be an appetite for it, because I think across a whole spectrum of organizations, especially in human services, they're knowledge organizations, and they're still looking to make informed decisions. And a lot of it, as opposed to capital P policy, which government does, is more around professional practice. So how can they take the evidence of good practice and academic research and distill that into quality programs for community? The benefits, dedicated time for professional development. That was one of the things we really heard, is like, you gave me the time and space to be able to think about this, because it's kind of been rattling around in the back of my brain. So they really appreciated that chance. How does research relate to their practice? That was highly contextualized in most of the presentations. And I think when they broke into small groups, they had a chance to really kind of look at their own practice and collectively discuss that. The skills development around storytelling was a unanticipated outcome. This is from my perspective. It became a strand that became louder and louder over time, especially when folks if they would see their colleagues presenting and be able to tell a really rich narrative of how they were able to engage with either in community-based research practices or collaboratively with an academic research to solve a problem that they had, that research was a mechanism to affect positive change in their organization and community. And the last one, because we kind of let folks know that we were available to them if they had any emerging questions or opportunities, and if they wanted to connect with anybody at York, we would help broker and facilitate that. So the benefits were consistent and positive and a little more far-reaching than I had expected. But it was interesting because it worked out well, but our work cultures made it a bit bumpy at times. It was very much a hurry up and wait venture from my standpoint. The United Way, especially after the amalgamation of the three agencies, they were kind of like a university, if I'm being blunt. They worked well and they didn't always work fast. So it just took a while for us to get to that place where development took a long time. So there was a lot of trust in the process, trust in our knowledge base. There were a lot of questions I had to have. I'd get up early and have a coffee meeting with folks and just kind of answer their questions and similarly kind of working with their admin team to push it out. But the partnership development created a really strong foundation for us. I have one of the byproducts of that course. I had just completed a 1-year placement. I worked with the United Way, Greater Toronto, 1 day a week within their research, public policy, and evaluation team to help build their knowledge mobilization culture, but also help give their member agencies greater access to folks at York. So that was a really cool legacy from all that. Just going to take a little water break. So I think that was all really cool. I'm highly biased. I mean, I could talk about this forever, but I'm sure in the back of your minds, some of you are like, well, that's great, Michael, but what about us? Like let's kind of distill to the so what. My first thought, can the University of Saskatchewan, and maybe this is a USask, Regina thing, can you guys come together and coordinate a Saskatchewan version of MobilizeU for your campuses, for your communities and partners? I mentioned before that York and SFU are delivering this right now. And I think, well, I know that the MobilizeU working group is looking to expand campus-specific iterations of MobilizeU. To me, it's the opportunity for partners across this network to take that ball, run with it, and go deep, go deeper. It would allow for more localized capacity building efforts. It's, as I mentioned, it's happening at Simon Fraser University. It's being considered for the University of Quebec at Montreal, which, they would be delivering that in French, which would be very cool. And it's not a quick thing, right? I mean, I think it would require some conversations. Who would be that campus champion who's affiliated with Research Impact Canada that could engage with this working group to understand not only the curricular components, the delivery mechanisms, but some of the administrative components too. And not to be locked in on an assumption. Are there other ideas for a Saskatchewan specific solution? Questions? I guess that means I'm done.
Not quite yet. We're going to keep you in the hot seat a little
Well,
longer.
no, I'm not looking to. I'm not looking to take off. So I will stop presenting and we can start chatting.
The Saskatchewan version is interesting to me because that's how AM and the AM started, right? We made a Saskatchewan version of what you guys are doing at York, and We've only grown. Right, recently we've tripled our membership. We're offering more sessions like this. Before the pandemic, we were doing in person, and then the pandemic moved us to online. And we're committed to keeping an online component, but also reintroducing some in-person activities. And we've expanded membership to include all of Saskatchewan, not just the U of S, which is where we started. Fleur and I started at the U of S because we didn't see any training that was out there for us working in this area. And so we decided to build what we didn't see.
I love it.
We built on what you guys had already done. Right, Fleur? I mean, it worked out so well. And we're really proud of what we've built here. And so having that ingenuity and that, I guess, push forward, and as one person said in the chat, I think we are small but mighty. And that's true across the board here in Saskatchewan. So, that's got me thinking a few different things. So we may have another conversation in the future because we really are innovative here in Saskatchewan, and we can make little amount of resources stretch a long way.
Well, there's no doubt about it. We've collaborated for a long time. I there are a number of folks on this call whom I've had a chance to meet, and I don't doubt that for a second. So whether it's adhering to the RIC curricular process, I mean that's what, or creating an alternative, and it could almost be spun out of this group, so that there's options there, and I think that's exciting because, well, a lot of it, like a lot of your work, it's kind of born out of both need and opportunity, right? So,
Right.
Yeah.
Right, because people weren't able to easily access a lot of the training that was happening, and it was mostly happening in Eastern Canada. And for folks here in Saskatchewan, that's a very expensive trip, right?
No doubt about it.
There are hotels, plus the cost of a course, it takes up a lot of resources. So, I mean, we wanted to make that just a little bit easier and bring quality, like high quality training, not just your typical free webinars. And I hope that lands with our members as well, because, we do deserve high quality training that we can easily access financially and, via the internet.
100%.
And so your idea there about a Saskatchewan version of MobilizeU, I'm going to think about that for a little while.
Yeah.
And I'll be contacting you again in the future about
that.
No
problem. And Bonnie, I'm actually glad you mentioned that, because I mean, given the scope of the opportunity, I think it does warrant a bit of reflection, right? And probably a bit of a group think where you come together. It's like, okay, what could this? And so the reason why it's called MobilizeU, everything at York University gets the U put on the back. Our commercialization folks run like an incubator program called the Launch U, like YU, right? So every single thing, and we started out MobilizeU. It's a lack of creativity, I suppose. It's kind of catchy, but the national working group through Research Impact Canada is like, well, we'll remove the Y from York and just call it MobilizeU, because that would resonate with everybody across the country. So they've kind of stuck with that.
Well, the messaging is really nice and clear on that, though, right?
And goodness knows in this space that we need as much clarity around messaging. I mean,
yes, plain language is still a big topic here. I'm doing lots of webinars and presentations to folks in the nonprofit world about plain language and clear language and how that feasibly affects their bottom line. Oh, Fleur's got her hand raised. Go ahead, Fleur.
Yeah, I was just going to say, for folks that are like thinking about taking the summer MobilizeU course, I see it open. The registration opens April 28th. I went and took a look at that. So if you want to take it, probably get your name in there as soon as it opens, since you have fewer spots now. But I would say, from having taken it, it's one of the kind of courses that you kind of get out of it what you put into it. Like, there's so much that you can do. You can do like 1 hour a week. I think you had on some slides of 1 to 3 hours a week, but you could spend way more time.
Absolutely.
And the more time you spend on it, probably the more you would get out of it, because there's so many resources and additional resources, and there's like the online like chat board and all kinds of things. So, and it's a very when I did it last year, I think there were like 200 people in it. So it's a big group. You could make connections with lots of others, but it always sort of depends on how much time you have to put into it. Because I think, you can kind of do it surface level, or you can go deep, and it's an incredible value. Even if you have to pay for it for people that are not in member institutions.
Yeah. I mean, thanks for it.
It's great. I mean, it gives you a really good sound base in what knowledge mobilization is all about. But like Fleur said, you get in what you put out. So if you already got that sound base, you can take that learning level even further. And you guys, as like the I guess the teachers of this information, were easily accessible with questions. I think I gave you more questions than what the ticket was worth, but anyway, it's
well, that's important. It's important to us. I mean, we were at, even professionally, we got hired, and then we're in a systematic learning phase, so we know what it's like. And I mean, for me, it was the graduate students that came in, and it's like I I thought I'd want to anchor part of my scholarship in this, and some leaned heavily on that. So that notion of, because what we've really tried to do over the years is, here's access to pretty much any and all resources we can get our hands on. So like, there's the reading list, and folks just, of course, I mean, some folks just eat it up. It's like, well, where else can I go? They start to explore other international expertise too, which is also growing. So
Yeah, but having something here in Canada, there's a benefit to that,
yes.
I believe. Catch McDonald has a comment here. Do you want to unmute and join the conversation, or do you want me to just read it?
Sure, I can jump in.
Excellent.
I just want to double check that my mic is.
Yep, I can hear you. Okay.
Yeah, just wanted to jump in. I'm a research facilitator at Sask Polytech, and so we, some of that knowledge mobilization is a bit baked into a lot of what we do. And so if there is discussion about sort of a Saskatchewan-based version, I guess, I think we'd really like to be involved in some of those conversations and just see how we can sort of lend our perspective to some of these discussions. So I know there's, we also have a research facilitation network within the province that might be able to connect a little bit, as well as there's sort of a interprovincial polytechnics network across the prairies that are getting started in some of this. So.
Nice. See, Kathy, you really touched on an important component that I don't think I really hammered home, is the growing number of assets. So that this is where a lot of this development is no longer taking place from a bit of a, not a deficit-based model, but more the, you need to scrounge and you need to go and identify the expertise. The growing culture around this means either folks are aware of it, but often have some sort of experience and expertise within it. So this collaborative development process, and we'll use a Saskatchewan model, for example, I think it could be rich with assets, and it would be contextualized assets around unique research, human services, and policy challenges within the province. So everything is just so highly locally contextualized, and that provides additional value. So that's exciting. I don't think that necessarily would have been there, I don't know. Well, to a certain extent, it would have 5 or 10 years ago, but it's a little easier to have these conversations now, perhaps.
And Katja, we'll definitely put this on our next planning committee meeting. Katja is also part of our planning committee at KM in the AM.
Awesome.
And we'll have further discussions around it. I think there's promise here. There's something. Let's see, no other comments going forward, but when you were pulling all of this together initially, I mean, I know Kristen's amazing, and she had a big hand in how this looks. Did you find any challenges initially when you were trying to get buy-in for this idea of MobilizeU? Like, how did that initially start?
The conversation took place internally between her and I, and it was kind of born from the fact that, you know, we're delivering a lot of these workshops across campus, and if we were able to come together and create a structured, systematic approach to present this information as part of a broader capacity building effort. So it did take some work, because there were certain, like, if you look at those 8 weeks, there are certain things in which we have more experience, in which there is more content to be able to deliver. Some require a bit more effort. The notion of inclusive knowledge mobilization took us some time. And I'll use that as an example where, you know, while DE and I it's becoming increasingly important across campuses in the crunch. And
Mhm.
we started to look at and critique our own practices too, and realize, well, we kind of made some missteps. So it was but that was the one that really took us a little while. Once we stepped away from that notion that we need to be the deliverers of this content, we can be the curators of the content and pull out and kind of aggregate resources. But when we're able to identify champions in our neighboring communities and across our campuses whose scholarship or professional practice like weaves directly into this, then
Mm.
that unlocked things. That helped us out. I think the other thing I give our office credit is, regardless of whatever practice it is, we have an annual, like a day, we go off campus and do a full critique. Is this still working? What are the new and emerging opportunities? So there's a bit of a deconstruction, reconstruction process, and part of it is just you kind of like touching up your home, right? Maybe it needs a fresh coat of paint or some of that. But in some cases, it's like, yeah, that module is no longer working. We need to explore something else, and it's not because necessarily it's working. It's just things can percolate.
Right.
Like I guarantee you, we look at this curricular framework 5-10 years down the road, new and emerging things will arise. So,
And that's what it's meant to do, right?
yes.
So if we did take hold of this idea, what 3 things would you advise us to do? The top 3 things, top 3 lessons learned, maybe.
Top 3 lessons learned is do it collaboratively. I think once we started working with a broader working group, it allowed us to really kind of sing. I mean, I'm proud of Krista and I and what we did in those early years, but once we started working more broadly, it kind of really accelerated the thinking. I would the second thing is commit to evaluation. And I mean week by week, and just kind of collectively, we really pay attention to the feedback we've gotten from participants. It's mattered to us. It's helped us to make refinements around the content and the pedagogy. It's really helped. The third one, and because I also think we do, well, maybe it's our office, but I would communicate the hell out of your success if there are things you are doing. If you create something that works out in the Saskatchewan context, I'd tell everyone and anybody that listened, right? It's just
Right.
and less from the place of, we want to tell you how great we are, but it's more that you're kind of shining a light on the participants and the process and the results of that. So yeah, I don't take to that really easily, but I also know that there's a responsibility to it.
Yes.
Because it's not me saying like this, enough about me, how about you talk about me? That's not the intent. It's more just, we're delivering an important service and we want you to know about it, and we also want you to know why we think it matters.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah, and we've done all of those 3 things with taking KM and the AM, right?
Right.
It always has been collaboratively with the U of S, and when we grew further, like folks like Katja are on board. We're getting buy-in on a greater level. I think I'm explaining less and less to people what KM and the AM is, because people are now they know about it.
Yeah.
But it's to communicate the H double hockey sticks out of the successes, where we haven't done a great job, but I mean it's very organic.
Bonnie, a fourth thing, and I mean you asked me for 3, but I would try to engage with USask and UR to see if there is an internal champion, which would probably allow you to more easily hitch a wagon on the formal MobilizeU brand, because if then
Yeah.
it's like, here's the keys, like here's everything. The whole notion of just creating something from scratch, you could
Right.
do it, and you
Oh, yeah.
guys would do a great job, but that mechanism is there, and if they're willing to be that conduit.
That's why we stole your name, KM in the AM. It was already, and it's worked out really, really super well. I see Fleur has raised her hand. Go ahead, Fleur.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about this. Michael, you might have remembered that the Saskatchewan NEAR and then NEAR national networks were sort of involved when Rick put in that application that wasn't successful last year.
Yes,
So
correct.
when we were looking at training around that, I don't know, I have some ideas about this. Maybe you and Bonnie and I can stay on after and we can have a little bit of a chat about it, because I think there might be capacity within our NEAR network in Saskatchewan and then more broadly around this. Yeah, it's a cool idea.
It is a cool idea. And yeah, no, collaboration is what we're all about. And we have a few organizations across the province that have joined us. Like the Saskatchewan Polytechnic, and some of the community colleges have joined us as well. Oh, and I see folks are ready to go. So unless there's any last minute questions, I know I set the time to 9:30, but feel free to trickle out if you have something else to do, or ask another question in the chat if you have something to say. We'd love to hear it. Oh, and Rana is very interested in knowledge mobilization and its impact. And we'll share the idea with Rassi, director, to see how we can support you. Rana, write down my email. It's bonnie@bonniezinc.com. And shoot